Maggie, it's really great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. So I wanted to ask you some questions that are often posed to us by leaders who we work with. I think in terms of race, one of the key questions or key challenges for leaders now is working out what to do. Leaders are keen now to create anti-racist organisations. We know that, and they know that experiences for Black, Asian, mixed race, other minority ethnic employees are very different and are less positive for those groups than they are for white employees. And the American activist Angela Davis noted that where racism exists, it's not enough to be non-racist, we need to be anti-racist. So leaders are asking, what can they actually do? What does leading towards an anti-racist organisation look like? So, we've already used this term anti-racist. Could you just explain a little bit, what does that actually mean? What does it mean? What does an anti-racist organisation look like?
So for me, anti-racism are quite kind of difficult concepts to kind of grasp. Mm-hmm. So this is my thinking and my kind of approach to it. Organisations have built into their DNA through time, and they could be a young organisation actually, but have through their organisation, through their systems, their policies, and therefore their people in act, activities, ways of viewing the world and their business from a perspective. And that perspective tends not to be truly global. Organisations aspire to that, but it's not. When we start to delve into what are these policies, why is it that you have X number of, for example, graduates coming to your organisation and a proportion of them, too high, Black, Asian, minority ethnic, leave more than their counterparts, what is that about? And organisations that are anti-racist will actually have their data, they will know that, and they'll be unafraid to ask the questions of themselves, why might that be the case? As an example, when we go to anti-racism, we then have to think about, and I think this is about a power relation, this is what Angela Davis talks about a lot, as a power relation. If organisations are, and I assert they are, have racist kind of aspects to them, maybe intentional, maybe not, usually unintentional, how does the anti-racism take out? How does it look? And for me, that's through its people. Its people are the ones that carry the messages, the practices, the ways of being, the culture. They carry that. So there is a point of everyone acknowledging that they are actually perpetuating the racist structures that organisations have in them. Now that's quite hard to accept and understand, and I would want people to challenge that. At the end of it, it's about what is your narrative as a business, if, and I hope everyone does, accepts that we live in a society, let alone an organisation, that has elements to it which really discriminate against certain sorts of people. And in this case, with race, it is Black, Asian, minority ethnic.
So why is it important to create an anti-racist organisation? Why should leaders be interested in this?
If leaders aren't, they are missing out on so many things. It's not good for their business not to be aware and to take steps to be anti-racist. It's not good business. They won't attract and retain the brightest and the best, and their lateral hires, their new hires. They won't do that. They will have a reputation eventually, if they haven't got it already, out in the marketplace of how others perceive them, trying to win new business. Clients also, on the other side, more and more, and customers are actually saying to businesses, this is not good enough. Whatever there is, it's not good enough. And I think there'll be pressure more and more on businesses to actually be articulate in this area and to be able to demonstrate what they are doing, particularly as the agenda now is moving, has been for a while in business, but it's to do with kind of the ESG agenda, the environmental, the social and the governance. And I talk about business, but I actually mean any organisation, really. It can be a small charity, or it can be a huge university department. It's just an organisation of people.
Okay, great, thank you. So what what then can leaders, senior managers, what can they actually do in terms of the way in which they behave? How can they signal that they're actually wanting to create this anti-racist organisation, and they're behaving in a way that, I've heard talk about real models and role models, that they're walking the talk, that they are actually helping to create this culture where employees are valued and included, all employees.
I think there are many things that leaders should already be doing, but can do. And the first has to start with themselves. Have they moved through what is called an anti-racist model in terms of their own learning and their own understanding? Have they moved from the fear of whatever it means to them to be anti-racist? Where are they and what's their narrative on this? The fear part is when they hear something, they're in denial. When they hear something or they see something, they are not comfortable being uncomfortable. And then a leader will say, well, actually, I'm not so fearful. I've tested things. I've created the environment with my teams. So I'm in the learning zone here. I want to know more. And I want to draw on the people that I'm working with to help me, no matter who they are. A good leader is one who's empathetic, who understands how they feel, and can express that with their teams in true, authentic stories. They don't have to have certain lived experiences, but they can certainly show that they appreciate and can be, as empathy is, put themselves in someone else's position. I think a good leader wants good data. If you need to persuade me about anything, actually, but on this topic, show me your data, and we can then have a conversation. And a good leader goes from the data to action, which is, and you talked about walking the talk and so on, is actually them standing up in, I'll say, town halls or team meetings, whatever it might be, and actually starting off with what I'm going to call basically an inclusion moment, which will have a theme to it that the leader has noticed recently in the business, or whatever it might be. So I think there are a number of things leaders to do. In fact, there's so much that they can do. I think their task is to choose what's right and relevant for them.
Okay, so you mentioned data, Maggie, which is obviously a really important point and a sort of critical starting point for leaders to be able to understand what's going on in their organisations. And I think many organisations have already taken the first step in terms of collecting some data. But what would be your top tips in terms of, I think often it can stop there. It's not very nuanced. What would be some of your top tips for actually collecting data that is really appropriate and gives insightful information about what's going on in the organisation?
Organisations, I think, need to think about when they collect data. Some, I hear, will kind of be in despair because they haven't got sufficient. People haven't responded. And that tells me a lot about the organisation. So first of all, every organisation, any organisation, has to create the atmosphere, the mood, that actually their data is not only secure, because we take that for granted, but also that it will be diced and analysed in ways that are helpful to everyone. So first of all, I mean, most organisations now have to, for reporting purposes, comment on their data. And most organisations use the classifications that the government of the day, but usually more than that, say are important for us all to collect, to know each other and to understand. I would encourage any organisation to not only have a curiosity about collecting data, but particularly want to delve into, and if they're brave enough, to actually add, so we might know about someone's ethnicity and so on. One area that's growing almost under the race and anti-racist banner is to do with also the position of class. And most companies, most businesses don't ask that question, too nervous. Yet most businesses and companies are talking about social mobility. And I'm bringing that with the anti-racism because that's what it broadly is about when we look at our population that we're exploring here in terms of Black and Asian and minority ethnic people. So I would encourage organisations to collect the data. I would encourage them to be specific, depending on their sector and their market, what they really do need to know, over and above that which they are required to report on. And for some, it'll be, and it's intersectionality, which is quite important, that we've yet to understand what that looks like in data. in terms, it confuses data at the moment because I don't think we're clear about what we mean. I mean, what we should mean is that no one person is only one thing. And when we look at the protected characteristics particularly, we will see that many, I'm a black woman, that's just and of a certain age. I mean, that's 3 indicators already. It's kind of dicing that so it makes a story for that business, I think.
Okay, that's great tips, thank you. Okay, it's been said that racial inequality is a problem of bad policy, not bad people. So do you think that's true? And if so, what are the implications? What does it mean for leadership action?
So racial inequality is a result of bad policy rather than bad people. So I like to think that all people are good. So I'd like to start there. And on the whole, I don't think many people wake up every morning, rub their hands with glee and say, I can't wait to get into the work, wherever it might be, and mess up. I don't think most people do that. So let's just base it on that actually there aren't many bad people. I think people become bad because it's lack of awareness, lack of education, and lack of experience. Policies are in place, yes, and they're the things that should be easy to change. Harder to change people. It should be easier to change policy, but of course people drive policy. Not only do they create it, but they enlive it, and they perpetuate it, and they add to it, and so on. So I would say policy is important here, but not because the people driving it are bad. I think people are trying, on the whole, to make even a bad policy, which there are often many, into a good one. And that's where they come unstuck, because you've got a bad policy, hasn't been reviewed for some time, it's not representative of the demographics of the community or the clients or the employees, and they're still trying to hold on to old ways of working. And that makes people, I think, bad.
Thinking about decision making, how can that be made more inclusive? So how can leaders actually ensure that important strategic planning, strategic decisions is influenced by diverse voices? So we know the majority of organisations, we go up the hierarchy, the underrepresentation of black, Asian, minority, ethnic people becomes lower. So those people, in the natural state of things at the moment, aren't sitting at those tables where those important decisions are made. So how can leaders actually practically try to bring more voices, diverse voices to those decisions?
I think there are 2 things they can do, simple things. They can get people of difference into those boardrooms, if that's what, or the senior teams, not as it were, a substantive member of that team, but to hear a different view. And most organisations have employee work groups and so on. I think use those people more and be unafraid, no matter what the tier, bring them into those decision-making meetings or to give a view. I also think that leaders, because of the makeup of what you're describing and most senior teams at the moment, what would I expect of them? I would expect them all, let alone just one, but all of them, to have this heightened awareness about what inclusion is about. Let's say that they don't, then I would want to work with them or encourage them for one person in each meeting to listen to the debate, have a discussion, and it's like a 6-hat thinking, and just be the lens of diversity and inclusion. So that when decisions are made, that person may be seen as an agitator, may be seen as someone to say, actually, before we make a decision, can we just look at it from a different lens? And I think that role could be rotated around a senior team. It encourages them to be not only more skillful about what they think, what they do, but also to bring their colleagues on board. I think, and I've seen that at work, it is very powerful. It's a simple thing to do, but it actually makes everyone quite nervous until they get into the practice of doing so. And
I think that's great because it sort of formalises that role, doesn't it? If people have to take it in turn and it rotates. So that person isn't the agitator, the person has a recognised role in that, that's what they're bringing.
Absolutely, because we all have filters anyway, so why not, let's put a filter on the race discussion.
So how important do you think it is for organisations to be open and transparent about the race equality challenges that they have? For example, data on representation, which may not look so great. How important is it for them to actually put that out there internally, widely across the organisation, or even in the public domain? It can be an uncomfortable place to be. Is it important for them to do that, do you think?
I think an organisation who can declare with transparency their data, and it's uncomfortable to begin with, will become more comfortable the more they do. And they might be a leader in their kind of pack, in their area, or they might not be. It's to do with, if you're an anti-racist organisation, you want to confront and be uncomfortable and take the consequence for that, knowing that by doing so, you'll be trusted better and more. The engagement scores, I guarantee, would go up. More engagement from everyone. There's clear evidence about that. And again, I think your external stakeholders, whoever they are, will actually eventually appreciate what you're trying to do, what the organisation's trying to do. It's no longer, for me, it's not an option anymore to try and hide data. Of course, it's up to each organisation, but it's not good business. It's not how you engage people and get trust for your brand, whatever that might look like. And someone's going to find out. And it'll be on social media, and then you can't control it. Why? Seize it first and tell the story in your way, but be transparent about it.
Okay, and in terms of the wider group of employees feeling comfortable talking about race, classically we've heard that there is discomfort talking about race. People are nervous. Part of that might be to do with language and terminology. Can you describe any sort of strategies, or what's your thinking on this, on how can leaders take that role and demonstrate that it's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the important thing is having the conversation?
Yeah, and I work with too many leaders actually who, in terms of the language they use and how they express what they're trying to encourage their teams to think about or learn from their team members, I call it a real stumbling block. So language evolves, of course, and you as a leader, you are expected to be on top of much of that change and much of that evolution of language, but you won't get it right all the time. If you create an environment which is inclusive, you'll have people in your team who will help you, whoever you are, get to what the acceptable terms are for certain things. I've just written a book with a colleague called A Blactionary. It's the A to Z of race. Starts at A, gives you ideas and words to do and phrases to do with associated with black, right through to Z. And that's as a pocket book, and it's online. And it's because leaders more and more, the more they got to understand about anti-racism, the more they began to become quiet, because they were starting to get too nervous about saying things. And this little book is just to help people feel, actually, and I start off usually by saying, how do you know today not to call me coloured? How do you know that? And people just think for a moment. Not many people can say how they know it. And I'm encouraging people to think about, as a leader, how do you know the language has changed? And you may hear it somewhere, but then I say, how in your own professional practice do you know things are changing? And they'll go, oh, well, we read books, we have associations, we have resources, we have this and we have that. And I say, so why can't you apply that to this? And that's when the room usually falls quite quiet.